Welcome back. Today we're gonna make a DIY Squirrel rubber band powered airplane out of tissue paper. This will be a step-by-step build video, so you will not miss a single step. We are going to be using some tissue paper to make this Squirrel rubber band powered plane. I got this for about $1 from Dollarama, and what I like about it, it's super light, and unlike the other projects that I made in my channel, I used styrofoam plates, so I'm trying to switch it around a bit. So if we open it up, we get this beautiful paper. So here's a little sheet of that tissue paper, and I understand that in many countries you may not have this particular material. In that case, you might use an old plastic polystyrene bag or an old garbage bag. In whatever case, just make sure it's a very light material. Definitely not recommend to use a printer paper, that's super heavy. So to make the frame of our wing and our tails, I'm going to be using coffee stirrers to build that frame, and I understand they're not the longest piece, so I'll have to join several of them. So they're basically like popsicle sticks, and this is not the best material to use. You should be using balsa wood. If you have that available, use that. I don't have balsa wood, so I'm just gonna go with whatever I have laying around, and hopefully my propeller will be able to propel this entire thing forward. So the way this is gonna work is I'm gonna have multiple stirrers side by side, and maybe I'll trim out 1/2 of the middle one, and this probably is as big as I'll go. So the first thing I'm going to do is trim out that little curvature at the very end, because we won't be needing that little place. We want a straight edge, so just do that for about 10 to 15 of them, because we're going to need plenty of these stirrers. I'm now going to use a piece of tape and tape this tissue paper onto my work surface so that this paper won't move around as we're trying to make the frame. Another thing I like about it is this cutting mat has these grid patterns. So what we're going to do is when we attach these frames and these lines, we'll make sure that the wing is very nice and true. So the idea is I'm going to use this long, this is about 17 centimeters after trimming out the curvatures. So I'm gonna have one of them. I'm gonna cut out a little 9 centimeters piece, so close enough to about half of one of these coffee stirrers. So that's gonna sit in the middle, and another full piece is gonna sit on the other side, and that will be about the whole length of the wing. So I'm gonna use my Elmer's glue to attach these wooden sticks onto the tissue paper, and you can use any other glue as long as it's light. Just don't overwhelm it. This is a very light project, so just try to minimize weights wherever possible, because you don't really need too much weight. So I'm going to stick that on right here, and again using the grid lines at the bottom as my line of reference, I'm going to do this. Take my middle piece, do the same thing. Once you're done with the first frame, you want to leave about 5 centimeters gap, so 5 centimeters of width, and create the bottom frame. And as you're making this model, you might not have all the materials readily at hand, so I'm making with coffee stirrers. You might not have coffee stirrers at home, you might have popsicle sticks. I do feel that popsicle sticks is just a touch too heavy, so I wouldn't recommend using popsicle sticks to make this model, because you want this to be super light. Now for this section, I'm just gonna put another piece right on top and just mark a little line. I just think that it's a little different every time you're cutting, and you want to have a very nice and tight fitting. So want to make sure there's no gaps absolutely whatsoever. So that looks like a very nice fitting to me. If there is any gap, just trust me, cut another piece. You don't want to have any gaps there, because the corners, if they're weak, they're just going to be a little slanted off. So just avoid any gaps in the corners. And if you accidentally tear out any tissue paper anywhere, just don't freak out. You can always use a piece of tape and just tape the other side and it's gonna be as good as new. I'm now gonna mark about 8 centimeters away from the side edge for both sides of the wing tips. And I'm gonna add one more frame just to add another step of rigidity. So that pretty much completes the frame of the wing, but there's an obvious problem. These coffee stirrers are stuck side by side, so that leaves a little problem onto these intersections. So when you lift them up, they're gonna likely break. So in order for us to fix that, what we can do is take out little pieces of these wooden sticks and attach them right on top of these intersections, and that's gonna make sure you have a stronger frame. So once you have these little pieces cut out, I'm gonna now use my hot glue gun, not the white glue gun, because I've had bad experiences trying to stick the small pieces into those intersections. But even if you're using hot glue gun, you wanna use absolutely a minuscule amount, just literally a drop, just like that. And you just wanna put it onto these intersections. So this will prevent the wooden sticks from moving any back and forth. Just want to do that for all the steps. And I like to wiggle it a little back and forth every time I'm sticking out, so it helps to spread the glue a lot better. And again, this step wouldn't be necessary if you have a longer piece of wooden stick, just because I don't have that, which is why I'm having to do this. And now to make the horizontal stabilizer, I'm gonna use these two little pieces of sticks. And of course, these measurements will be available in the planner, which will be provided in the description box. So anytime you need to cross-reference, be sure to do so. So essentially, I'm gonna use this little piece of stick. This will attach right under the rudder, and which will go down like this. And I'm switching back to my usual white glue, and I just need one more stick, and this is gonna attach right over there. From past experiences, I don't really need any more, so just to reduce the unnecessary weight, I'm gonna leave it like so, and we can always curve cut this region, and that should be enough. And of course, don't forget these intersections, little dabs of hot glue, little pieces of sticks to secure it in place. As for the rudder, it's gonna be very similar. So thinking of having something like so, and the tissue paper will rotate like that and stick on top of this. So just gonna add, oops, was gonna use my hot glue. Again, this white glue. Stick it right there. Press against the tissue. Use this little piece. And this piece is gonna be the vertical stabilizer. And when you're sticking this, make sure this piece and that piece, they are nice and perpendicular. You don't want to have any funny looking angles. Now, as for the body, there's just one more thing to do, is to create some wing tips that will also help you stabilize the wing a lot better in the air. A lot of people I've seen, they already put some little pieces of sticks right here and they fold the tissue over. I would have done that had I not had enough space in here. So I wouldn't have enough space to fold this thing up. So I'm just gonna individually cut out these wingtips, but if you have more space, more tissue, you can just like put a little piece of stick here and push this thing against that piece. But since I don't have it, I'm just gonna make it individually. So the wingtips are gonna have a height of 5 centimeters. And I also need another piece right here, which is 6.5. And every build is going to be a little different, so you don't necessarily have to follow every single step that I'm doing. Just make it your own version. So for the wingtips, just going to add that in. Push it right there. And repeat. So now just grab your scissors and cut out all of these individual pieces. So I'm going to first take out this tape. Now I first like to cut each piece out. One thing you can also do with this wing side, you can use a very sharp X-Acto knife and score it against this wooden frame. You really don't need to apply too much pressure, it's only tissue paper. And here's the little vertical stabilizer. Same technique, just run your scissors across. You can either just take it all the way straight or you can even curve it. I like curves, so I'm just gonna make a very random shape like this. The design is completely up to you, however you like your plane. And here's the tail or the horizontal stabilizer. Once again, same techniques, and I'm gonna apply the curves. As you can see, we have a very beautiful wing. It's straight. There's a bit of a curve here because the sticks are naturally a little bent, but that's completely fine. These little sticks that we have applied on those intersections really helped build the frame out of it. Now we're gonna glue these wing tips, and it doesn't have the most flush surface, but what we can do is just add little dobs of glue to each and every corner and the middle, the areas that are gonna make contact with the wing, and just stick it on. And it's a very lightweight plane, so it doesn't have to be so strong. From the back angle, make sure it's perpendicular to the surface, very important. And anytime you have glue stuck to the surface, just rock it back and forth, don't pull it up, just rock it, and it's gonna come off very nicely. and that looks very good. Do the same for the other side. Always a good idea to test fit and then apply your glue. Another reminder, you don't have to go too crazy with the glue because this is a very lightweight plane. After that, we want to attach the horizontal stabilizer to the rudder. I like to flip it over, and this is just gonna stick like so. The hard edge is gonna be facing the front. Very thin bit of glue, just enough to cover the surface. Stick it onto the vertical stabilizer on that flat side. From the front angle, make sure it's straight. This Squirrel plane does not have a dihedral on the wing, which means this wing does not have that bit of a V shape. You can add that if you want, but I'm not doing that here. So in order for us to have enough lift for this model, what we can do is when this wing sits on top of the fuselage, we can have a little bit of angle of attack, which means this wing will have a bit of a higher upward angle. So what we're gonna first do for that is attach this little piece of stick. This will not only strengthen the wing, but will also help us to attach the wing onto the fuselage later on in the project. Stretch the wing so it's a very nice flat sheet. Press against. And this wing will have an upward angle. So what we're now going to do is add little jobs of hot glue and add this little pieces right here. Press. Add 2 more. So what this height will do is when this wing sits on top of the fuselage, it will have a bit of that angle that's going to help your plane achieve some bit of lift. We will now focus on making the fuselage of our airplane. So I have a basic barbecue stick. This is the regular size barbecue stick, which is almost 28 centimeters long, and the first thing I'm going to do is just trim out this little end portion. And this is not going to be long enough, so we need just a little bigger piece. So I have another piece of it. I'm going to measure, let's say, another 10. And I'm going to chop this off as well. So the idea is I'm going to join these two together to create just a little longer piece of fuselage. So the best way to do it is I'm going to use my plier and just pinch the little bit, just a little bit. And I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and I'm going to score just, let's say, 2 centimeters away from the big edge. Just going to score across. About halfway, and after I do that, I'm going to poke my X-Acto knife through that barbecue stick kind of halfway. So just placing my knife on top of the barbecue stick and just press against it, just like so. And you can just snap it off. Just like that, and you want to do that for the other side. Once you have that, you have these two little beautiful relief cuts, and you can put both the barbecue sticks together, and it basically looks like an even longer piece of barbecue stick. So the best way to stick these guys, I'm going to use a bit of super glue, apply a generous portion of it, and just attach it. You can use your pliers and hold the 2 pieces together, and while you're holding, make sure it's straight. I'm going to leave this barbecue stick to the side, and while the super glue is drying, I'm going to prepare the propeller. And like always, I'm going to use an aluminum can to make the propeller. First thing I'm going to do is cut this thing in half. And I typically make a circular shape to make the propeller, but this time I'm gonna try to make it a little bit more efficient by adding a little touch of more design. So the way I'm gonna do it is just making a very generic blade shape. So sort of like that, going all the way here. And my marker's been basically dried up. I'm gonna have to replace it. So sort of like this. You don't have to execute this design on your first go. You can always tweak in. It's kind of shaped like a helicopter propeller shape, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. But once you're happy with that design, grab your scissors and cut this thing out. It's always a good idea to cut a little extra because you can always go back and trim out any unnecessary bits. So once you're happy with your propeller blade design, use that to trace on top of another piece. Once you have both the blades together, it's always a good idea to place one on top of the other and really make sure that you have a close enough to symmetrical shape. And it looks like the one on the bottom is just a little oversized, so it's always easy to go back to your scissors and just trim out any extra bits. So here I have a 9 centimeters long coffee stirrer stick, marked the middle. And as you know, propellers do not have a very flat design, so if you just stick these propeller blades on top of the stick and try to spin it, it's not going to generate any thrust because you do not have a propeller shape. And how that's going to work is this piece right here needs to have a bit of a twist. So in my other tutorials, I typically used a barbecue stick and just cut it out and made sure there was that propeller aerodynamic angle. But in this case, what I'm going to do is use this stick. You could also use a popsicle stick if you don't have these. You can twist this stick and that will give you a propeller-like design. So it's not going to maintain its shape, so you can grab a lighter or a candle and just place it in the middle for about 5 to 6 seconds and then just twist. Be very gentle with it because if you twist too hard, it might break the stick. Once you've established this beautiful shape, we're going to now use an aluminum wire. So I have this very long piece of aluminum steel wire. It's basically a paper clip, and unbend it. I'm not gonna need the whole thing, so I'm just gonna cut it out. And very crucial, you want this piece to be super straight. So take your time, use your plier, and do every bit of necessary step to make sure this steel wire is straight, because if your steel wire is not straight, your propeller will vibrate and conclusively it's not going to have a good thrust. It's going to have a lot of vibration, a lot of waste energy. You don't want that. Now we're going to use a push pin to puncture a hole on this propeller stick. I believe it'd be a better idea to do this before twisting, so sorry about that. So all you're going to do is just poke your hole into that middle. Once you have a big enough hole for this aluminum steel wire to go, you're going to use your plier and make a 90-degree bend. And another bend this way. Now pass this wire through the popsicle stick, or the coffee stir in this case. We're going to bend this again and use our plier to stick it in place. So I'm now going to use my plier and hold this aluminum wire in place and kind of bend this over, so kind of pressing against it. Just like so, and just making sure that the aluminum wire is sitting flush with the popsicle stick, the coffee stir, just like so. A very nice shape right there. We're now going to use 2 pieces of plastic beads, and we're going to apply them right here, so that will reduce the friction of the propeller as it revolves. If you don't have these plastic beads, you can even use tiny little pieces of these wooden sticks and even glue them on here. That'll work the same way, but the beads are just a little better, of course. So now what I'm going to do is apply my hot glue and making sure I use very minuscule amount. You don't want to go too crazy because this model is very lightweighted. So that should be about it. And I'm going to pass this plastic bead through the aluminum wire and stick it onto the propeller. Another good idea is to simply use this hot nozzle of your glue gun to just strike it against the daubs of glue that are like kind of sticking out. That'll help to better spread the glue around. So after this, we can now attach our propeller blades to our propeller assembly. So thinking of doing like so, just like that. Don't be too crazy with the glue. One long strike should be enough. A little bit more generous, but still not going too crazy. Attach it in place. From the other side, make sure your propeller blade is nicely aligned so it's not off-centered. The other side. Same way, flip it around and just make sure they're both aligned so the spacing between the blades and the center is symmetric. I typically would use more hot glue around here, but I find it's absolutely unnecessary. It doesn't provide too much extra strength, it just provides an extra bit of weight. And out of all the areas for this project, you want your propeller to be as lightweight as possible because this is the thing that's going to spin and you want this to be very light. A good way to check if you've made a good propeller is to just simply twist. You should feel air striking backwards as you're spinning. And you can also see that beautiful curvature on either side of the blades. Another bead is going to go through this. And now we're ready to attach this propeller onto our fuselage. And in order to mount this onto the fuselage, we need to build a propeller bearing. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab this barbecue stick, this spare barbecue stick, and just mark 2 centimeters of it, 3 pieces of them. And I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and roll against this barbecue stick to cut it out. Just rock it back and forth and you can just literally snap it open. After this, take your fuselage, the big piece of barbecue stick, and apply some hot glue. And stick these little pieces to that little nose. Once you have that ready, use an old pen, take out the plastic tubing, and trim out roughly 2 centimeters away from it. And we're going to do the same, so use some more hot glue. It's a pretty big bearing. In other words, this bearing has a good height. And just stick this on. this plastic tubing needs to be just large enough to pass the aluminum wire through. And this tubing does not stick the best with barbecue sticks. That's why what I find it'd be better idea to also use some string and wrap it around. And I'm going to use a bit of super glue, adding just a bit here, other side. So after you complete making the bearing, it's now time to pass this propeller wire through that tubing. And in this side, we're gonna make a little hook to catch the rubber band. And I just like to bend it once, twice, like so. And don't wanna complicate it too much. That little shape should be good. And for the rubber bands, you really have many options. You can take multiple small rubber bands like I am, or you can take a longer, thicker rubber band. Essentially, I'm gonna hold two together and make a knot like this. And I think I'm gonna stick with two. I'm gonna hook this on to the propeller assembly, and the other side is gonna go right there. Since the little crack is right here, so I'm gonna make a little hook to catch the other side right behind it, so I'm not really putting too much pressure onto the crack. So I'm gonna use that remaining bit of aluminum wire that I cut out earlier. So just gonna hold it right here and just gonna twist and make a hook. Just like so. And again, once again, I'm gonna hook this rubber band onto the propeller assembly and hook this thing on to the end. And that's essentially gonna finish off our fuselage. We can give it a test run. That spins beautifully. Every time you see that the propeller is not really straight, you can always just use your fingers to kind of straighten it up, and you always have a lot of that flexibility, so you're good. Now, after this is done, we want to now glue our two pieces onto the fuselage, so let's do that right away. And once again, remember the angle of attack that you've established onto the wing. So just remember that is going to go forward, and you want to be very careful with where you place them. The higher up towards the nose you place the wing, the more lift your plane will get, and in that case you're gonna have to put more weight onto the nose to balance it out. So I like to keep it somewhere around the center of the fuselage to begin with, maybe a little bit forward. So just, there's no right way out of the moon, so you're just gonna have to trust yourself and just go with it. Try to be a little bit more generous with the hot glue because this thing is gonna mount the entire thing. So I like to have the fuselage sitting up and glue the wing while it's down so that you can kind of make sure the bearing is nicely aligned with the wing. So that way you can for sure know that your wing is straight. I'm also going to put more glue towards the sides just to make sure this wing will not snap open when there's a big crash. We're going to do the same for the tail as well, and this also has a tiny angle of attack, which really doesn't make sense, but I'm still going to apply just a bit of glue towards the top, a bit towards the back, and just stick this on. And crucial step, from the top angle, you want to make sure the back edge is parallel to the leading edge of this horizontal stabilizer, and from behind, from this view, you want to make sure this is nicely parallel to the wing as well. So kind of multitask from both the angles because you really want to perfectly align this tail really well to the fuselage. And with that, your Squirrel rubber band power plane is officially complete. Wind up your propeller about 30 to 50 times depending on the size and thickness of your rubber band. Today was a considerably breezy day and it looks like the plane has struggled a little but still good enough to have some decent flights. It was at this moment when the plane hit really hard on the brick wall and the propeller has snapped open. So I returned back to my basement and switched up the propeller on day 2. It was so windy, so I had to fly it indoors this time. I added some bent paper clip on the nose to add some balance to the plane because it was a little tail heavy. I also added up some coffee stirrers to the horizontal stabilizer simply because the tissue was kind of folding over, so I thought I'd do this step. And that's about all the updates I have for this second day of flight. If you found any value in this entire video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more related content. I appreciate you guys watching, good luck with the build, and I'll see you in the next video.